A very good morning, students. We are in our regular class lecture, and for today's class I will try to give you a generalized outline on sedimentary textures. And for this topic I had referred the book The Introduction to Sedimentology by S.M. Sengupta. So let us get into the heading, the sedimentary texture. Actually, the term texture refers to the pattern formed within a sedimentary rock by the constituent grains, and this can be best studied under the microscope. So this is the pattern that is formed with the grains in a sedimentary rock, right? That is the term texture. And to study this, what you can use is you can use a microscope for the study of this type of textures. Actually, the sediment rocks are broadly classified into two. That you know, right? The mechanical origin as well as the chemical origin. The mechanical origin is one in which there is a source rock. On the source rock, there will be weathering, then erosion, then transportation, then deposition on a basin. And after that, there is a lithification, then forms a sedimentary rock. So these type of steps involved in a sedimentary rock, which is called the mechanical origin. And there is also other type of rock which is called chemical origin, where there will be only solution and precipitation takes place. So we will see the first one, that is the mechanical origin. In a sedimentary rock of mechanical origin, the framework grains are joined together either by finer fragmental particles or by chemical precipitate. The finer fragmental particles are called the matrix and the precipitates are called the cement. The pattern formed by the framework grains along with matrix and cement is called the clastic texture, and the sandstone shows the best of this kind. In the left side image you can see here the coarser grains are called the framework grains, which has been transported from the source rock, that is from the provenance, and the matrix is also transported along with this framework grains. The difference is that the softer minerals maybe get crushed and become finer matrix, and the harder one like quartz will retain as a bit bigger size, right? So these two were originated together and transported together. And the next one, that is the cement, is something which has been deposited in the basin from the liquid state, that is from by precipitation. So all these three things together forms the clastic texture. As we discussed earlier, there is a chemical origin. So we will see that the textures of rock of chemical origin is produced wholly by chemical precipitate material. So there will be no intergranular space, and the limestone of orthochemical origin shows this kind of texture. As you know the difference between the mechanical and chemical, the main reason what we are interested in mechanical origin is it shows it has a record from the provenance to weathering as well as transportation and deposition, all these things. But in terms of chemical origin rocks, you can only find the configuration of basin as well as the pH, all the chemical properties of the chemical parameters of that basin only. So what we are interested is we are mainly interested in the clastic rock, and there are also limestone which is of which has the clastic texture, that is called the allochemical limestone, which is produced by fragmental piece of calcareous materials that is joined together either by carbonate mud or calcspar, and that also can show the clastic texture. As I said mentioned earlier, the clastic texture. The clastic texture are important for us, and the clastic texture defined mainly by size, shape, and roundness of the framework grains. Other features which play important role in clastic textures are the grain-to-grain contact, that is the grain-to-grain relationship, and the grain packing. And the porosity as well as variability of a clastic rock depends on these parameters. So we'll start with the grain size. So the definition of particle size is related to the technique used for measuring it. When a particle is large enough to allow direct measurement of its diameter, say by a caliper or by micrometer scale fitted on a microscope ocular, size can be expressed in terms of diameter, right? In terms of say longer one, shorter one, or intermediate. A problem arises when the grain is too irregular to allow direct measurement of this diameter. So in such case what they will do is they will go for the displacement method, that is grain has been immersed in liquid. The amount of liquid that is displaced, that is the volume of liquid that is displaced, will be equal to the volume of the grain and by using the formula V is equal to 4 by 3 pi r cube, we can find the radius of that grain. Here the V is the volume of the displaced water and R is the probable radius of that sphere. Okay, and this has been termed as true nominal diameter by Waddell in 1932. Oh, this is okay if the grains are bigger in size. Actually, the Wentworth size scale, the fragmental particle constituting the sediment rocks covers a wide range of grain size, say from boulder, which is by definition is more than 256 centimeter, to clay, which is actually less than 0.004 nanometer in diameter. Since the handling of such a wide range of grain size is a difficult problem, a geometric scale is used instead of an arithmetic scale. In wooden 1914 scale, the consecutive figure of the scale increases by the multiples of 2 on the higher side and decreases by multiple of 1 by 2 on the lower side. The various size range within a grade were named by Wentworth in 1922 as follows. That is, a boulder is a grain size which is bigger than say 256 millimeter. A cobble is a grain size that ranges between 256 to 64 millimeter, and pebble is a grain size that is between 64 to 4 mm, and the granule is a grain size that is between 4 to 2 mm, and the sand is one which is in between 2 millimeter to 1 by 16 millimeter, and silt is in the range between 1 by 16 to 1 by 256 millimeter, whereas clay is finer than 1 by 256 millimeter. So this is the grain size scale which has been proposed by Wentworth in 1922. Actually, the wooden Wentworth scale system is not only provided an appropriate scale for representation of grain size, but also standardize the sedimentary nomenclature. Because before that, what happens? There are so much of confusion in terming the grains according to the size. So, adaptation of this system of nomenclature by the Committee of Geologists and Hydrogeologists dispel the confusion created by arbitrary assignment of the name to different part of the grade scale by various authors. And not only that, the wooden Wentworth scale and nomenclature system are actually universally used today. There comes the next one is the pi scale. In the earlier days of sedimentology, when the mechanical or electronic computer facilities were not readily available, handling of fractional values of wooden scale, say 1 by 16 or 1 by 32, whatever it is, involves tedious computation. As a solution to this problem, Crumbine in 1934 introduced a method of logarithmic transformation as follows. Here pi is equal to minus log base 2 d, where d is the diameter of the grain, that is in millimeter, and conversion of pi to d grain, that is attained by the following, that is d is equal to 2 power minus pi. So the use of 2 as the base of the logarithmic allow direct conversion of wooden grade scale to the combined pi scale. Moreover, inversion sign covers the fraction of positive round integers, thereby making an easier computation for the finer fragments, that is say from sand, silt and clay, as all these three lies in the minus scale, right? So by converting it into minus, the sign what we get is plus, right? Which constitute the bulk of the sediment. Not only that, the log scale contains the large range of grain size of the sedimentary particles, thereby helping the graphical representation. As you know, if you are handling with the wooden Wentworth scale, the numbers are from 256 to 1 by 256. So the range of the numbers are very high. If you are dealing with the pi scale, all these numbers has been condensed within a very small range that I will show in the next slide. So that will be quite easy for you to represent the data in the graphical form, right? This advantage popularized the pi scale throughout the world. So the left side image shows the pi scale, Wentworth scale with the actual millimeter size. You can see here in Wentworth scale the range of people is say 256 to 4, whereas in terms of pi scale you can see it is from minus 8 to. So the number range is say minus 8 to 8. So this is the range of pi scale, which we can represent in a graph without any problem, instead of representing 256 to 0.004, which is quite difficult for us to represent in a graph. So next heading is that the grain size measurement. The technique commonly used for grain size analysis or the direct measurement, say by micrometer or caliper or whatever it is. The second one is the sieving, and the third one is the settling, right? So the direct measurement includes the micrometer measurement, that is using ocular scale fitted in the ocular. If it is a bigger size, then you can use vernier caliper, right? And if it is say in the range of sand, then you can go for sieving. Like here is the image of the sieve set, which consists of different ranges of sieve sizes. So according to the size of the grain that has been settled in that mesh, that you can separate out quite easily. And the next one is the settling technique, which is mainly used for clay studies. So in this, the main mechanism is that the time required for the clay material to settle at the bottom. So the finer one will settle at the last, and the coarse one will settle at the first. Right? That is the main mechanism that is used in this type of settling techniques. And there are more sophisticated methods such as image analysis of SEM picture, electrical resistance pulse, and light blockage counters, disk centrifuge, and laser scattering devices can also be used for the grain size measurement. So these are some of the new advanced techniques that is used for the measurement of grain size. And the next heading is the roundness and shape. Actually, the roundness and shape of a clastic particle are two separate parameters independent of each other. The roundness implies rounding of the edge and corner of the clastic grain. The shape is expressed as the ratio between the three measurable diameter of the irregular grain, that is say length, breadth and width. Other measurements of shape includes the sphericity and flatness are also sometimes used. So we'll see the roundness. Actually, according to Weddell, the definition of roundness is the ratio of the average radius of curvature of the edge and corner of a grain to the curvature of the maximum inscribable sphere. And according to Weddell definition, the roundness of a sphere is say 1. The nearer the natural particle is to this value, the more rounded it is. A chart giving a photograph of a pebble of different roundness values was published by Power in 1953 to provide a quick aid of roundness determination by the visual comparison. So you can see here this is very well rounded, this is rounded, this is sub-rounded, this is sub-angular, then angular and very angular. So this is the table that is published by Power in 1953, which can be used for the direct verification of roundness. So let us see some of the applications and limitations of these terms, that is roundness and all these things. Actually, the rounding of sand size particle of quartz and feldspar is negligible during fluvial transport. Whatever roundness is attained during the transport is confined only to the first few kilometers, and that is to observable only in the pebble size grain. So the roundness doesn't have any direct influence when you are dealing with the finer particles. That is what they are mentioning here. And this has been explained in this left side image, which is a research report of Mr. Mohapatia in 1988 of his MSc dissertation. Here is the report in which he had expressed this thing, that is the roundness of sand size particle of quartz and feldspar is negligible during the fluvial transport. Whatever roundness is attained during this transport is confined only to the first few kilometers. So you can see here the roundness index, which is say up to certain limit. After that, it is not actually concerned about that. The beach action is effective agent for rounding of pebbles but not for sand. So if you are handling with pebble size and if you are seeing well rounded, that could be due to beach. But if you are handling with sand size particle, you cannot say directly just like that. The rounding of sand size grain is believed on the basis of experimental studies to be established due to the aeolian action. So whatever the roundness in a sand size, that could be mostly due to the aeolian action. So that indicates directly that is the rounded sand size sediments has been deposited by the aeolian action. And the effect of solution in a rounding of quartz grain has been shown to be negligible by Cruen in 1960. So the solution action may not create a roundness in a quartz grain. So what if you are seeing a round grain size of sand which is of a quartz composition, that may simply implies that is deposited by an aeolian action. And for the grains larger than sand size, size and roundness generally shows a positive correlation. And this is so because the smaller grains which are produced by chipping of the corner of a larger pebbles are more angular than the remaining central part. And that is why if the grains are larger in size, then it will be more rounded according to the distance transported. The fact that roundness is controlled by size of the pebble rather than the distance of transport pulse a serious limitation to be used for pebble roundness as a paleo current indicator. The size and roundness relation in a sand size is more complicated. For example, Banerjee 1964 shows a negative correlation between the size and roundness of a sand and they explain this as being the result of mixing of first cycle and second cycle grain. As you know, the first cycle implies that it is the sediment that is uh, actually have a source rock of a igneous rock. If it is a second cycle grain, then the source rock would be of a sedimentary origin. So that is actually going one second it is weathered, eroded, and transported from a sedimentary rock itself. So that could be one of the reason for this type of roundness effect. The next heading is the shape. Actually, the shape of sedimentary particle can be defined in many ways. A simple classification introduced more than a half century ago by Zing in 1935 used the ratio between the breadth to length, that is B by A, and thickness to breadth, that is C by B, of the particle concerned. And according to that, there are four different shape nomenclatures, that is tabular, equant, bladed, and prolated, that you can see in the left side image. You can see the relation between the tabular, equant, bladed, and prolated. Another approach to the shape measurement, the closeness of the grain to a sphere, is called the sphericity, and this is determined by the ratio of small s by capital S, where small s is the surface area of the sphere of the same volume as the particle having the surface area of the S, that is the capital S. For an ideal sphere, the ratio should be 1, and it is difficult to establish a direct relation between the Weddell's sphericity index and the zinc shape for sediment particles. Pebbles of entirely different zinc shape, that is oblate or pileated, may have the same or similar sphericity. So you can see here all this four, that is very angular, angular, subangular, subrounded, all these six will come under a single term, that is low sphericity, and all these six will come under high sphericity. So there is no any direct relationship between the zincs as well as the Weddell's sphericity index. So let us see the last heading, that is the grain to grain contact, that is called the packing. The arrangement of framework grain within a clastic sedimentary rock and also the nature of contact between the adjacent grain controls what is commonly termed as the packing. The packing of grain in turn controls the porosity and also indirectly the permeability of that particular rock. The point contact, long contact, concave or convex contact, and suture contact are some of the terms commonly used in describing the nature of the grain contact. So we will see the first one. When the matrix proportion is very high, then what happens? The grains are simply floating in the matrix, and such type of contact is called actually the floating grain contact, or actually floating grains. When there is concave or convex contact, generally implies there is a solution effect. So here is the concave or convex contact, which implies that this is due to the solution effect, whereas the solution along with the pressure produces a sutured contact. So here is a sutured contact which has been formed due to the action of pressure as well as the solution. When the rock unaffected by the solution or pressure, they can show point contact, long contact, tangential contact, or whatever it is. So these two contacts, that is a point and long contact, has been due to the absence of pressure as well as solution action. So the index of packing of the framework grain may be determined by the counting the number of grain to grain contact in a random cut section of the rock. The resultant may be expressed either as packing proximity or by packing density. The former, that is the packing proximity, is the ratio of number of grain to grain contact to the total number of grains counted in the traverse, whereas the packing density, the ratio of the sum of all grain intercept to the total length of the traverse. So I hope I have given a generalized outline about the sedimentary textures. If you want a detail of this thing, you can refer the books. There are so many books in our library that you can go for. And if you still have any doubt, you can just ask me in the class. Thank you.